Okay, hi. Um, so thanks for joining me this morning. Thanks to Creative Mobile for inviting me to come speak here and for organizing this. I think it's really great to see this kind of activity happening in Estonia. I actually used to live in Estonia a couple years ago. I worked at Skype, and it's really cool to see this kind of small but energetic and growing game development community here. So. So the title of this is Marketing Tips for Indie Developers from someone at a very large developer, or how I'd think about marketing as an indie or a startup. So I I work at Rovio, and I'm the vice president of user acquisition there. And before Rovio, I worked at a company called Wooga, where I was the head of marketing. And so I've been working at kind of like bigger mobile game studios for a long time, kind of overseeing budgets in the $1 to $2 million per month range. And I've given kind of talks in the past, like GDC or Casual Connect. They're usually geared towards people that are spending around that kind of money. So basically strategies for optimizing that level of spend. But then I've also given talks to at conferences where the audience are indie developers, and that kind of money is sort of like unthinkable. So I put together this presentation about a year ago, sort of like specifically tailored for small studios that don't have any money. So like the assumption here is that anybody here is in indie studio? So the people that don't have their hands up, are you at a bigger studio or? Okay. Who here does not have a budget in the $1 million per month range? Okay, good. So about me, I wrote the book Freemium Economics about the freemium business model. It's available on Amazon. I'm the vice president of user acquisition at Rovio, the company that makes Angry Birds, and I run the website Mobile Dev Memo. So it's mobiledevmemo.com. So just a really quick overview of the state of the mobile market as I see it. So like I said, this is like a year old, so these numbers are higher. But yeah, you have basically these platforms that are full of apps, right? Lots and lots of apps. So there's a lot of ways that people can spend their time on their mobile device, and you releasing one app is just sort of, you know, and yeah, okay, it's sort of, entering a very crowded marketplace where it's difficult to stand out. Um, so people are actually kind of downloading and playing fewer games now than they potentially were when the platform was less mature, right? And so this basically just shows the share of people's time spent across their sort of apps as rated in terms of like their favorite, right? So you see here that nearly half of mobile time is spent on users' first favorite app. Like their favorite app gets almost half of their time on mobile, and then across the top two, it's more than half. So people they don't have this like sort of kind of visceral need to download lots of apps. There aren't people that just sort of fire up the app store and search for new games because they feel the need to play something new, right? The way you reach these people is either through word of mouth or through advertising. It's very much a push acquisition strategy rather than sort of like a pull growth strategy. There aren't people that just search for apps and find random ones they never heard about and download them. That simply doesn't happen. The only way to grow your user base is to either put an ad in front of somebody that they can click on or have one of their friends tell them about the game. This shows kind of the ownership of mobile time by the big companies and then the big app verticals. And you see here that the bigger companies own lots and lots of mobile time, right? So not only are you competing with those 1.2 million apps in the App Store, you're competing with people that had gigantic audiences on desktop and brought those audiences to mobile, right? So if you think about how do I recruit someone to play my game, you're not recruiting like this person who just got a smartphone for the first time and wants to download this new app thing. You're competing with Facebook. You have to take mobile time away from Facebook and put it into your app. And that's actually like a really difficult proposition. So this is some Nielsen study, and it said that users only use 26 to 27 apps per month in total. And there's simply no need to use more apps than that. Unless you're creating like a sort of new behavior like Uber. If you're tapping into an existing behavior like gaming, you're probably not going to be able to just steal mobile time away from some other app developer. Just by virtue of being on the App Store. The only way to recruit players to your app is have someone tell them about it or put an ad in front of them. So this is, I wrote an article about this like a year ago, but I mean, this kind of shows the general saturation level of the mobile app economy. And you see here that in a year, only 3 new apps entered the top grossing charts. And you know, the incumbents remain there and actually grew more or less stronger. And this has actually even gotten more aggravated since this time because Machine Zone has released more games. Supercell has released more games. Here again, you see that the top 25 mobile apps by unique visitors are owned pretty much by a small number of big developers, and these big developers had huge audiences on desktop, right? So they're not competing for users on mobile. They have users. There are Facebook users and Yahoo users and Google users. They bring them to mobile, so they're not actually competing. You're competing with them, but they're not competing with you. They have nothing. They have nothing to compete with you on. They already own an audience on desktop, and they're simply transporting that audience onto mobile. This is an interesting chart. It's really old, but I would very much doubt that it's changed kind of fundamentally, which shows that most mobile phone owners don't download any new apps in a month. On the average month, the average mobile smartphone owner does not download a new app. And then here again is just that kind of comparison of the top downloaded chart. So the earlier chart was grossing, this is downloaded. So you see the top 10 downloaded games in June 2015. And what were these? So you had basically, a lot of them were these sort of existing pre-mobile companies that own huge audiences and can bring them to mobile. One or two were like these kind of temporary viral blips, and then like 2 of them were basically truly viral phenomena. So I mean, this kind of idea of like the viral phenomenon that just takes off and builds up a lot of momentum is sort of a myth. There aren't that many of those. So what are you up against as an indie developer, as a bigger developer? Pre-mobile behemoths, so the Facebooks, the Yahoos, the whoever that bring their existing audience to mobile. Rich incumbents with strong networks that can be tapped for cross-promotion. So here you have the Supercells and the Rovios. And a shift in discovery from within the app to within the social circle. So there really is no mobile discovery. It doesn't happen. People don't search for new apps. They either hear about an app from a friend or see an ad for it. And you're seeing possible saturation points in the West in terms of app usage. And you're definitely seeing saturation in the West in terms of smartphone penetration. So you're not getting people buying their first ever smartphone anymore. It just doesn't happen. You're getting people on replacement cycles of about 2 years replacing their smartphones, but they have their smartphone. They understand the use case for all the apps that they use, and they have a sort of select portfolio of apps that they use on a daily basis, and they're not interested in downloading new apps. You have to convince them. So all that said, the rest of the presentation takes the form of 4 marketing imperatives for a small developer. And I assume here that you have 0 money for marketing. Like, this isn't a budget-based strategy. This is like product-driven. So the first one is what I call 2 for 1. So you need to create a game for which it is true that every player brings a friend. You have to. That has to be the nature of your app. It has to be viral with like a K factor of 1. Every single player that plays your game must bring a friend. That obviously has a massive impact on marketing costs. So this is just a chart, and the assumption here is that you've got a weekly new user cohort size of 500, and this is cumulative installs over time. It's obviously linear, right? So you 500 in the first week, 500 more in the second week, that brings you to 1,000, and after 8 weeks you have 4,000 cumulative players. This is assuming that there's 0 virality to this game. So when you model this with a K factor of 1, which in K factor is just a measurement of virality, right? So what a K factor of 1 means is that every single person that plays your game brings another person into the game. So if every single person, I download your game and I bring my friend in, and then he brings his friend in, and then that person brings their friend in, so it compounds. So here, if you have that virality of that K factor of 1, your cumulative installs are over 20,000 versus 4,000 after 8 weeks. So here, I mean, building a game where this is true, it's not solely or exclusively about reducing your marketing costs, but if you have a game for which that is true, it's probably a good game. It's probably like a really, really great game. And so while you're prototyping and thinking of game ideas, if this isn't true, you might rethink whether you should publish a game, right? Because if this is true, it means your game is really great. So if you sort of optimize the development process to this, if you say, look, the game that we release, this must be true for, then you sort of set that as like a release barrier or a release threshold, and do not put games into the App Store until this is true, or until there's at least some level of virality. So, and then why is that a proxy for quality? Well, if someone shows your game to a friend, they're probably also more likely to spend money in the game, click on an ad for premium features, attend a meetup or tournament or some real-world event, and buy a shirt, toy, sticker, whatever. So I mean, these people, if they're so excited about your game that they're willing to tell their friends about it, they're probably also, they're probably also really good customers, right? They're probably also like they're probably willing to support your business in some way that results in you making money. So social design is an imperative. You must make a game that creates the space for people to invite their friends. And that's kind of generally supported with social design, but it could also be sort of like graphical fidelity or some new gameplay mechanic that no one's ever seen before. I mean, people like showing games to their friends. They like being tastemakers. They like being thought of as the people that introduce new cool things to their friends because those people are valuable. And so if they are waiting for any excuse to be able to do this, and so just find a way to give that to them. Players will always be your best marketing tool. But the key here is not to think about K-factor, right? You have to achieve this without kind of specifically setting out to do it, or at least doing it in such a way that it seems exploitative or simply doesn't work. So this kind of stuff sucks, and people don't really do it anymore. But this is the kind of infamous Facebook spam that you got when Zynga was really big. This doesn't really happen as much on Facebook. This doesn't take this form anymore, but it still exists, right? Like this kind of method, this kind of model exists. And it's really bad. It doesn't work. It makes people feel exploited. And it seems spammy, so the platform operators don't like it. So this isn't a way to achieve that. This is a really good example of virality that wasn't engineered into the game, but nonetheless exists, right? So this is the forum for Clash of Clans. And if you think about a game, if you think about proxying for quality and level of delight, if you have people spending like their non-game time thinking about your game and talking about your game and strategizing and socializing with their clanmates, that's probably a signal that the game is pretty good, right? So if you're able to create that space, to create the need to do this, then your game is not only social and viral, but it's also pretty good. So the next imperative is just the kind of realization that LTV over CPI is irrelevant for you. Does anybody know what these acronyms mean? Okay, so this is so LTV is lifetime value and CPI is cost per install. So basically, this is just the sort of marginal profit calculus that people like I think about, people like myself think about. So basically, this is this is the determination of whether your game is like profitably is capable of being marketed profitably, right? So if I'm making more money per user on average than I'm spending to acquire them, I'm making money, right? That's my profit margin. So why is this irrelevant to you? Yeah, is it hard to hear? Okay. This is better? Okay. So this kind of calculus or this way of thinking about growing your user base is for companies that are operating industrial UA at scale, right? That are spending lots of money because, fundamentally this is this calculation only really matters at the margins, right? When you're spending as much money as you can. So this helps you determine how big you can grow the user base. So if I have if I'm buying, or let's say I'm acquiring 100 users a week, I can make LTV more than CPI. It's pretty simple. But that's not the point. The point is to grow user. This is good? Okay. So this is really only if you're operating at like a huge scale, running budgets of like millions per month, right? Because that's only when it matters. It doesn't matter at the $1,000 a month scale. You can make LTV more than CPI. That's not going to be a meaningful amount of users. It's not going to be a meaningful amount of revenue for you. This only matters at max scale. And generally speaking, it only matters when you have a lot of money. So these metrics probably don't matter to you if you're an indie developer without lots of money to spend. Because again, like I said, it's a proxy for marginal revenue at channel and demo scale. So also, keep in mind that LTV is a projection, right? So when I put together a model for LTV that generally projects cash flows from a user out for like a year, and a big company could do that because they have money to support operations while they wait for that money to come back, right? So if I'm a player and I download a game and I was acquired via an ad for $5, and the developer expects that I'm going to pay more than $5 to that game, but over the course of a year, right? So they put that $5 down, expecting to get, let's say, $5.50 back over the course of a year. But you can only do that if you have that money to sort of put down and wait a year to get back, right? If you're a small developer and you don't have this sort of budget or basically the money in your balance sheet to just sort of forget about for a year, then this is totally irrelevant anyway. So what you should forget about LTV and focusing on balancing cash flow with growth. What that means is don't think about channel saturation, don't think about demographic saturation, just focus on getting to sort of like cash flow profitability in a short amount of time so you can build up a cash balance. So look for large LTV spreads on channels with high volume and ignore the long tail. And what I mean by that is generally, so like a person in my position, I try to get the actual margin on LTV and CPI pretty low because I want to have a really, really big user base. And the reason for that is, A, it provides more viral users just because the aggregate numbers are bigger, so the number of viral users that I get in is bigger. And also there's a benefit to having a big game versus a small game, even if I make the same money on that LTV CPI spread. So I want to minimize those margins. But if you're a small developer, you should actually look for the channels that bring you the most revenue, right? But you're not thinking about this channel saturation. So look for the best channels that work for your game, and don't focus so much on the thinness of the margin and the size of the user base, but just focus on making a lot of money with whatever resources you have. And also you should make sure that you're hitting your key demographic and making them happy, right? So what I think a lot about is how can we in the earliest like concepting and development stages of game for our game teams, how can we sort of fit this game with the aesthetic or the theme that makes it appealing to the most number of people, right? Because we're a big company. We need to make really big games that have huge audiences. But you probably don't spend that kind of time doing market research. You just make games that you think are cool. So figure out who these games are most cool to and most fun to, and focus on trying to penetrate that demographic. I guess my point is don't try to make these big, gigantic, I mean, you should want your game to be really big, but you probably made it with a specific person in mind. And you could spend a lot of time and be distracted by the sort of marketing strategy, or you could just sort of make sure that the people that you made the game for really, really, really love it and listen to them for feedback. And of course, try to achieve the 2-for-1. So the third imperative is that UA does not have to scale. So like I said before, scalable UA is for companies with big balance sheets that can wait to make the money back. They don't need it right then and there. We can also test for demographic fit and play with the margins. So, but if you do things that don't scale, it can help you build a fanatical user base with your core demographic. And the cost here is not paid in cash, but it's paid in time, right? So some examples of this. So I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Space 8 Games. They made a game called Samurai Siege, which is sort of Clash of Clans-ish. But what they did was their kind of strategy in launching this was that, okay, we're coming late to the Clash of Clans party, but that probably means that there are a lot of clans in Clash of Clans that feel like they can't compete anymore because they joined the game late and the sort of top clans are sort of cemented in their status. So we want to make a game to peel away the people who are in that second tier of clans who could be really competitive in the top tier in our game because they're new to it. So what they did was they just went on all the Clash of Clans forums and they reached out to all the YouTube influencers and they said, hey, please come check out our game. We'll set your clan up. You can take your clan over. We'll give you some resources. We'll help you get started, and you can be the top clan in this game. It's too late for you in Clash of Clans, but you can do that here. So this didn't cost them anything. I mean, they just did this outreach on forums and stuff and sent people messages. It was really costly in terms of time, but you know, there was a price to this, but it didn't cost them cash. When cash was like more sort of like mission critical than time at that point in the life cycle of their company. Best Fiends did a lot of this. So Seriously, the developer from Finland, they did a lot of this too. They did a lot of like outreach. They just talked to influencers. They said, please talk about our game. Look how cool it is. They made characters for people, and they sort of like supported this idea that you know, these influencers and these people on Twitter and these people on YouTube, they were partnering with them. They weren't abusing them as sort of like a free marketing resource. They said, hey, partner with us, be a part of the development process. And so people got really excited and were happy to talk about the game. A company called DirtyBit in Norway did a kind of similar thing. So they made this game, which is kind of like a real-time PvP running game. And they basically just tried to seed it with high school students. So they literally like went to high schools and talked and showed the game to people. And it like blew up in popularity in Norway, and then that actually like sort of like spread worldwide. And so they ended up hitting the #1 top downloaded position, and they didn't spend a single cent on UA. I mean, these are marketing strategies, but they're not sort of like paid marketing strategies in the sense they're not spending money on these campaigns, but they're time intensive, and they don't scale. But that's probably what you need to do if you don't have any money. So once you've got an initial track, then you can and you have positive cash flow, you can start thinking about moving into UA. But if you don't have that, it's not an option anyway. So you should think of stuff like this. And in any case, if you can't delight your core demographic, if you can't get the group of people that you made the game for, if you can't get them to be excited about the game, then you're never going to be able to do UA anyway. So this is a good test for that. If you can get people really excited through these marketing activities that don't scale, then it's kind of a sign that, hey, we probably can do UA at some point. But if there's no way to get people excited about your game, then UA is out of the question anyway. And the fourth marketing imperative is that Apple should love you. So why should Apple love you? If Apple doesn't love you, life will be much more difficult than it has to be. With every decision you make, especially early on, ask, why would this help Apple fall in love with us? So why did Apple fall in love with Vainglory, and why did they get this guy to play it on stage at their like big yearly event? Because it used their iPad graphics library, Steel, I think. It looks awesome. This is practically just seeing screenshots for this game. They're practically advertisements for iPads. That's why Apple loved them. So align your interests with Apple's. Have a beautiful game that either grows through word of mouth and sells iPhones. Have a social game with built-in social obligations. Again, like this kind of stuff sells iPhones. And have an ability to span multiple forms of media, right? So if you have like a tie-in with music or something, or in some way your game can exist not only on iTunes or not only in the App Store but in iTunes, it's really helpful, and that makes Apple want to love you. One thing to keep in mind is that Apple honestly does not care at all about how much money your game will make in IAPs. You're not going to make Apple rich through the 30% cut that they take. They're already really rich. They're making a lot of money on hardware. They really don't care how much money you make on IAPs. They're totally indifferent to your success unless you're going to help them sell iPhones. And I think like the last point here is, if you're running a business, you need to do things like marketing and business development. I mean, there's just no way around that. That's what businesses do. It doesn't matter if you're in a creative industry or not. So if you think about, if you're a small company and you're a CEO, your job is kind of also business development. And the way you interact with Apple shouldn't be annoying to them. Don't be creepy. Don't be aggressive. If you see somebody from Apple at a conference, don't corner them. Don't make them feel intimidated or annoyed. Like any interaction they have with you should be so easy and interesting that they want to continue working with you. So like if you see someone from Apple at a conference and shove your phone in their face and demand that they play your game, they're probably not going to like that, and they'll be less probably inclined to feature your game. And if you can get featuring, you've basically been handed a $1 million+ check in the form of free marketing. So do everything you possibly can to make Apple fall in love with you. And if you don't have the kind of disposition to be a good business development person, maybe get somebody who does, and don't just sort of take that important, critical business function on yourself to save money, because in the end of the day, you're still running a business. So that's it. That's my Twitter and my email. You can feel free to reach out. I think just out of time now.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. We got like 2-3 more minutes. Any questions to Eric?
mentioned there were like two ways to put the game like in the player, through an ad or through the word of mouth. And I know there is the possibility also to have embed games on through manufacturers. How hard it's for independent developers to reach like a pre-installed game on, I don't know, maybe a not well-known manufacturer, to say.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get that, do it. I've never been. So I've had proposals for this, you know, from a number of different manufacturers. It's generally always in, you know, poor monetizing countries, and it's generally always with manufacturers that don't have a huge footprint. If that's worth your time, sure, go for it.
But do you know cases that they work like this? It's just an idea. I never tried, but
Well, look, I mean,
yeah.
you've got a, you know, probably more things that you could potentially be doing as a small company than time to do them in. So you have to sort of prioritize. That, to me, I've never seen an offer to get like pre-installs in Germany on Samsung Galaxy, you know, high-end phones. If you get that, do it. But if you're talking about, you know, in Peru or like whatever, and it's, you know, on like the lowest end Huawei or something, probably not worth it.
Okay, cheers.
Okay, thank you again, Eric.